For almost 800 years, no foreign army had entered the city of Rome. Not Hannibal, not Mithridates, not Spartacus. On the 24th of August, 410, the Salarian Gate was opened from the inside, and a Gothic army walked in. It held the city for 3 days. This film is not about how Rome was taken. It is about the 15 years that the man who took it spent asking for a job. Alaric did not want Rome. What he wanted, and asked for again and again in writing through envoys for 15 years, was a Roman military command and land in a province where his people could farm. Rome could have given him both. Rome could comfortably afford both. Rome said no and kept saying no. The ribbon on this map measures one thing, the distance, in miles, that these people had walked from the river they crossed as refugees. In the summer of 376, tens of thousands of Goths arrived on the north bank of the Danube. They were not invading. They were running from the Huns, and they asked the Emperor Valens for asylum inside the empire. He granted it. The crossing was supposed to be supervised, disarmed and fed. Instead, the Roman officers in charge sold them dog meat. The price, according to Ammianus Marcellinus, who was alive at the time, was 1 child into slavery for 1 dog. By the time the ribbon reaches Adrianople, these people have walked 100 miles into Roman territory and have been starved by the government that admitted them. At Adrianople, the local commander invited their leaders to dinner and tried to have them killed at the table. He failed, and the Goths outside the walls found out, and from that evening the asylum seekers were an army. For 2 years the ribbon wanders, not towards anything, around Thrace, from one grain store to the next, because these are people who still have to eat every day and no longer have anyone to ask. Rome sent forces to contain them and could not. And then, in the summer of 378, the ribbon reaches a town called Adrianople. On the 9th of August, the Emperor Valens attacked them without waiting for his nephew's army. By evening he was dead, his body never found, and Ammianus reckoned barely a third of the Roman force got away. It was the worst defeat Rome had suffered in 600 years. It was also, and this is the part that matters, a defeat inflicted by refugees. 4 years later, Theodosius did something no emperor had done. He signed a treaty that settled the Goths inside the empire, on Roman soil, under their own leaders, exempt from Roman tax, in exchange for soldiers. They were not conquered and they were not citizens. They were a nation living inside another nation, and their contract had to be renewed with every new emperor. That is the arrangement Alaric was born into. Understand it, and the next 30 years stop looking like an invasion and start looking like a contract dispute. The Goths supplied men, Rome supplied land and pay, and every time Rome missed a payment, the only leverage the Goths had was the army Rome had asked them to raise. Alaric first appears in the record fighting for Rome. In 394, at the river Frigidus, Theodosius put his Gothic troops in the front line against a usurper. 10,000 of them died. The Roman line behind them held its ground, and its casualties were light. The Goths noticed. Alaric was one of the men who noticed. Theodosius died 4 months after that battle. He left the empire to 2 boys, Arcadius, 17, in Constantinople, and Honorius, 10, in Milan. Neither would ever command an army in the field. The empire was now 2 governments that did not trust each other, and Alaric, passed over for the promotion he expected, was elected king by his own people. And here is the thing that proves the case. In 397, the Eastern government gave Alaric exactly what he had been asking for, a real Roman rank, master of soldiers for Illyricum, with the pay and the supply that came with it. And for a few years it worked. He stopped. There was no fighting. Then the appointment lapsed. The East decided Alaric was the West's problem. The West denied he had ever held a rank at all, and the pay stopped. He had a nation to feed, and no legal way to feed it. So he did the only thing that had ever got a Roman government's attention. He marched. He entered Italy in November 401. On Easter Sunday at Pollentia, Stilicho caught him and took his camp and his family. Alaric withdrew. He was beaten, and the terms he accepted were, again, a command and a province. Again, the deal was made. Again, it was not honored. And in that same year, 402, the imperial court did the thing that decides everything which follows. It left Milan and moved to Ravenna. Ravenna was chosen for one reason. It sits behind a belt of tidal marsh that no army of the period could cross, with a harbor that can be supplied by sea indefinitely. From 402 onward, the men who decided whether to pay Alaric were personally entirely safe from him. Rome was not. Rome was 200 miles away. Stilicho was half Vandal, married to Theodosius' niece, and the most capable soldier the West had. He is usually written up as the loyal Roman holding the line against the barbarian. That is not quite it. Stilicho understood the arithmetic. Alaric's price was a fraction of what a war against Alaric cost. He spent years trying to get Ravenna to see it. In 408, he nearly succeeded. He brought Alaric's demand to the Senate, 4,000 pounds of gold. The Senate hated it, but Stilicho got the vote through, and one senator, Lampadius, said out loud what the room was thinking. "This is not peace," he said, "but a pact of servitude. It is the best remembered line of the whole affair, and it cost the city everything." 4,000 pounds of gold. Olympiodorus, writing a few years later, says the richest households in Rome drew that much every year in rent alone. The empire was not too poor to pay Alaric, it was too proud. In August 408, on a charge of conspiring with him, Stilicho was arrested at Ravenna and beheaded. He ordered his own men not to resist. The ribbon on this map measures the years Alaric had left before the Salarian Gate opened. It is at its widest in 395, when he is elected king with 15 years to run, and it narrows to almost nothing at Rome. Watch where he goes. Greece first, in 395 and 96. Thessaly, Athens, the Peloponnese. This is not a campaign of conquest. It is a demonstration aimed at Constantinople, and it works. In 397, he is given his Illyrian command, and the ribbon goes quiet. When the appointment lapses, the ribbon moves west, into Italy in 401, Pollentia and Verona in 402. He is turned back both times, and both times the terms he settles for are a rank and a province. By 408, the ribbon has crossed the Julian Alps for the last time. Ravenna lies off to the northeast of his line, and he does not go there. He goes to Rome, because Ravenna cannot be taken, and Rome can, and because the people who live in Rome can put pressure on the men in Ravenna in a way that Alaric cannot. That is the entire strategy, and it fails, because the men in Ravenna do not care what happens to Rome. Every point on this ribbon is a year Alaric spent making the same request. There are 15 of them. What happened next is the worst decision in the sequence. After Stilicho's execution, Roman troops across northern Italy turned on the families of the Gothic soldiers serving in the Roman army. The wives and children were in the towns, as hostages for their husband's loyalty. They were killed. Zosimus puts the number of soldiers who then walked out of the Roman army and straight to Alaric at 30,000. Alaric did not storm Rome. He sat across the Tiber and the roads and waited. The city held perhaps 800,000 people and imported almost every calorie it ate. Within weeks, the ration was cut to a third. Then plague. The Senate sent envoys who tried to sound confident, and Alaric is supposed to have laughed and told them the thicker the hay, the more easily it is mown. Here is what Rome paid to make him go away. 5,000 pounds of gold, 30,000 pounds of silver, 4,000 silk tunics, 3,000 hides dyed scarlet, and 3,000 pounds of pepper. They stripped the temples to find it. That is Zosimus's list, and the point of reading it out is this. The city found all of that within days, having spent 2 years refusing to find 4,000 pounds of gold. With the money went the only thing Alaric actually wanted, the request again for a command and a province. It went to Ravenna. Honorius refused. He refused again in 409, and again after that. There is no evidence he ever seriously considered it, and no evidence that anyone at Ravenna made him. So Alaric tried to make himself legal from the other end. In 409, he had the Senate proclaim a new emperor, Priscus Attalus, who promptly appointed Alaric master of both services. He had his rank at last, and it was worthless, because the man who granted it was a puppet. Alaric deposed him within the year. In the summer of 410, Honorius finally agreed to meet. Alaric came north and waited outside Ravenna for the conference that would have ended it. While he waited, a Gothic officer in Roman service named Sarus, who had a private feud with him, rode out and attacked his camp. Alaric assumed he had been set up. He turned south. That was the last negotiation. On the night of the 24th of August, 410, the Salarian Gate opened from the inside. The sources do not agree about who opened it. Procopius says slaves. Others name a noblewoman who could not watch the starvation any longer. What is not in doubt is that it was opened. It was not broken. The sack lasted 3 days. By the standards of the period, it was disciplined. The Gothic army was Christian, and Alaric gave orders that anyone reaching the basilicas of St. Peter and St. Paul was not to be touched. Orosius, who had no reason to flatter the Goths, records people being escorted there under guard. Houses burned. Thousands died. The emperor's sister, Galla Placidia, was carried off as a hostage. And then, on the 4th day, they left. They did not occupy the city. They did not install a government. They marched south, towards Africa, because Africa grew the grain, and grain was the leverage that might finally force the answer Alaric had been waiting 15 years to get. He never got there. A storm broke up the fleet in the Straits of Messina, and within months Alaric was dead of a fever at Cosentia. Jordanes, writing 150 years later, says his men diverted the river Busento, buried him in the riverbed, let the water back over him, and killed the laborers. It is a good story, and it may not be true. The news reached Bethlehem, where Jerome was working on the prophets. He stopped. The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken, he wrote, and he said he could not dictate for grief. Rome was not the capital anymore. It had not been the capital for a century. It was still the thing everyone measured themselves against, and that is what ended. In North Africa, Augustine had a different problem. Christians had been told that a Christian empire was a protected empire, and it had just been shown that it was not. 3 years later, he began writing the answer, and the answer was that Rome had never been the point. The City of God runs to 22 books. It exists because of 3 days in August. The ribbon on this last map measures the years the Western Empire had left, 66 of them at the moment the Salarian Gate opened. It narrows as the provinces go. Britain first, where Roman authority simply lapses around 410 and no army is ever sent back. Then Spain and southern Gaul, settled by the Visigoths, Alaric's own people, under very nearly the kind of treaty Alaric had spent his life asking for and never got. Then the one that mattered. In 439, the Vandals took Carthage, and with it the African grain and the tax revenue that paid the Western army. 22 years after that, the ribbon is a thread. It ends at Ravenna in 476, where a Germanic commander named Odoacer deposed the last Western emperor, a boy called Romulus Augustulus, and did not bother to replace him. He sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople and ruled Italy as a king. And notice what Odoacer wanted, because it is the same thing: land for his soldiers, and a title the Eastern emperor would recognize. He asked for both. The difference between Odoacer and Alaric is not ambition or violence or the century they were born in. It is that by 476 there was no longer anybody left in the West with the standing to refuse. The ribbon does not end because an empire was beaten in the field. It ends because there was nothing left to say no with. Ravenna was never taken, not in 410, not in 408, not once in the entire crisis. The marshes held. The men who spent 15 years refusing a soldier's request for a rank and a farm were personally safe the whole time. And the city that paid for their refusal was 200 miles away. Rome did not fall because the barbarians were strong. It fell because the people making the decisions could not be reached by the consequences.